Who are you today? Are you the same person you were yesterday? Or last year? Would you answer the same way in front of a mirror as you would in front of a crowd of people? In front of a judge? Or your boss? Or your family? Or your friends? In your heart, you know who you are. But why is it so hard to say it no matter where you are? Persona 4 offers the observation that the face we present to the world can shift from situation to situation. Persona 4 is the fourth game in the series. Originally, it was released on the PS2 in 2008, and the slightly extended version, Persona 4 Golden, was released in 2012 for the PlayStation Vita. I played it recently on the Xbox Series X. Persona games are a unique JRPG series which blends RPG-based combat with a day-to-day life simulator. Persona 4 follows the story of a high school student who arrives from the city into a country town in Japan, Inaba, far from the hustle and bustle of the big city. However, the player soon becomes embroiled in a series of murders and discovers they have the power to enter a special world, which is no less than a physical manifestation of Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious. The player investigates the murders in the collective unconscious known as the TV world and the physical world, all the while battling shadows, manifestations of people's darkest inclinations, and taking on the challenges of a high school student, including making friends, joining sports teams and clubs, working part-time jobs, and taking tests. In the overworld, the Persona games offer what is nothing less than a working theory of life itself by the creators. The player is responsible for deciding how their character will spend almost every single day for an entire year. The game takes place in a more or less ideal world, where everyone likes the main character and wants them to succeed. They never get tired, and they never have homework. They can work whenever they want at their part-time jobs. And everyone who disagrees with them is either a bad guy or is misguided and needs a change of heart. The game divides the days into convenient segments. On school days, the player will automatically attend school until 3 p.m. After school, the player has 2 segments of the day to do with as they wish, afternoon and evening. The player can choose to work on their overworld stats. Better stats give the player more opportunities in the overworld, including unlocking different activities and dialogue options. The 5 stats the player can work with in the overworld are knowledge, understanding, diligence, expression, and courage. So, the player might spend an evening studying to increase their knowledge, or they might spend the evening working as a janitor, which gives them money and also boosts their courage stat, because working as a janitor is scary. There are lots of options of what the player can choose to do with their time. They also might choose to spend their time hanging out with their friends. There are 23 social links in the game, each social link corresponding to a tarot major arcana, plus an extra tarot card, the Joker, which is not traditionally a tarot card, but it seems to appear in some versions of the deck. 19 of the social links will be available on certain days for the player to spend time and hang out with. Each social link has 10 levels. The player does not raise a level after every hangout session. Whether or not the player raises a social link level depends on the player's current accumulation of relationship points with these characters. These points can be gained by spending time with the person, saying the right dialogue options, and also incidentally through other sporadic events throughout the game. The player also gets more points if they have a corresponding persona card equipped during the interaction with that person. Raising social links in the overworld allows the player to create stronger personas in the TV world, and maximizing a social link unlocks an ultimate persona for each arcana. There are also weekends. In Persona 4, they only get 1 day a week on Sundays. They also have like a summer vacation, some other vacations, which summer vacation is about a month. The weekends are divided into 2 segments, like the player's afternoons. The overworld can get somewhat repetitive with all the random dialogue between teachers, walks to school, friends, jobs, and whatever else. The character is actually super busy, and it's actually really impressive how much this guy can get done in just a year. By the end of the game, you really do feel as though you know these characters, and you've lived out the life of a high school student in Japan for an entire year. It is possible to max out every social link by the end of the year, but it's extremely difficult, and you need to follow a strict guide, which is what I did. In a short amount of time, the player becomes one of the most popular dudes in school. They can date a number of their peers in the school, and in general, people are just stoked to be with the main character. It's a very convincing theory of life, with a few minor flaws. The rigorous segmentation of days into 2 portions after school and during the weekend is fairly reductive. Realistically, a person could divide more of those segments into more segments. On the other hand, there are certain activities which take no time at all, such as shopping and taking long motorcycle trips to the nearby city and beach. You can spend a whole day traveling in real life, I think. Assuming the character typically gets ready for bed around 11, it gives the character about 4 hours within each segment. He should be getting more segments on the weekends, I think. If he wakes up at, let's say, 7, he could do 2 more 4-hour segments, and the game just disregards this. The character is a voracious reader. His pace for reading books is amazingly fast, to me anyway, usually finishing them in just 2 or 3 sittings without speed reading. It seems fast to me, but I checked the internet and multiple sources seem to claim that the average reader can read 150 to 200 pages in a 4-hour period, so at least according to the internet, if the character dedicated his entire 4-hour segment to reading a book, it probably would take only 2 or 3 segments. Seems unbelievable to me though. It takes me at least a month to read a book. The character is also positioned as basically the center of the world as soon as he enters the small town of Inaba. His friends immediately make him the leader of their group and defer to him on basically everything. The player faces no competition within his group or outside of it. While the player makes many friends outside of the central friend group, the other friends in the group do not do the same. They just kind of hang out at their homes and do their jobs, I guess. This is a common trope in fiction where the main character is beloved by all despite being probably the least interesting character. I think anybody could be proud if they were able to accomplish as much as this kid accomplishes every day though. Never once does he just take a nap or binge Netflix. The player is also a stud in the dating world and can date multiple girls all at once, and they will never communicate with one another. For instance, Yukiko and Chie, 2 of the closest friends since childhood, both failed to even mention their romantic relations with their main man to each other. If the player chooses to date multiple girls in the game, the only consequence will be a very painful scene on Valentine's Day when they realize that he doesn't want to spend the day with them and probably isn't for real. The scene actually becomes a bit funny when it happens 4 times in a row though. Jobs the player can accept are folding envelopes, translating, making origami cranes, working as a dishwasher at a pub, working as a janitor at a hospital, babysitting at a daycare, and private tutoring. Other ways the characters can spend their free time include fishing, praying at the shrine, studying, making toy models, reading, going to the movies, eating at restaurants, gardening, exploring the area on your motorbike, hanging with friends, and going into the TV world. Free actions include bug catching, shopping for books, vegetable seeds, items, equipment, and clothing, chatting, traveling, gardening, visiting the Velvet Room. The player has the choice of joining either the basketball team or the soccer team, and either the drama club or the music club, and they also get to join the Student Health Association. The character never has homework, but their knowledge stat will affect their school ranking. Throughout the school year, the player has many interactions with the teachers as well. though none of them are available as social links for the player. They will feed the player random trivia, which the player needs to remember for the final exams, which happen on May, July, October, and November. Teachers include the rude homeroom teacher, Mr. Morooko, the lascivious homeroom teacher, Mrs. Kashiwagi, the PE teacher, Mr. Kondo, the inappropriate geography teacher, Mr. Yamada, the hand puppet wielding lit teacher, Mr. Hasoi, the history teacher who dresses like an Egyptian pharaoh, Miss Safui, and the quirky math teacher, Mrs. Nakayama. Other characters worth noting are Hanako, an obese classmate, Shiroku, who runs the pub and item shop, Daidara, the blacksmith, Tanaka on the shopping network, and also the owner of Aya, whose name I do not know. The TV world is a physical manifestation of the collective unconscious. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, Carl Jung introduced the concept of the collective unconscious as an aspect of the unconscious psyche, shared by all mankind and originating in the inherited structure of the brain. The Persona game extends this concept. In the games, the collective unconscious is not a static aspect of consciousness, but a constantly shifting and changing landscape, which emerges from and is directly linked to mankind's unconscious desires. The collective unconscious is also linked to concepts of spirituality. Within the TV world, the collective unconscious creates shadows, which are representations of mankind's darkest thoughts. These shadows typically will attack the player on sight, and also defend the dungeons which emerge within the TV world. In order to defend against these shadows, those entering the TV world can use personas. Personas are the representations of mankind's greatest traits, and are represented in the game as heroes, gods, and monsters from mythology and folklore. In the game, most people only have access to one persona. However, the main character has a special ability to collect as many personas as they can find. They start the game with a persona called Izanagi. It is unclear why the main character can wield multiple personas while others cannot, but perhaps it has to do with their interaction with Igor and his comrades early in the game. Igor reaches out to the player through their dreams. Igor exists on another plane of existence outside of space and time, and when the player visits Igor, their meeting space appears as a stretch limo driving through a thick fog called the Velvet Room. Igor is also accompanied by Margaret and Marie. The player can visit the Velvet Room whenever they want, and in it they can manage their collection of personas, and most importantly, fuse them into stronger personas. Sometimes, when people enter the TV world, an alternate shadow version of themselves is created, which is basically an amalgamation of all their repressed thoughts and also the perceptions of them by others in society and the people they know. Given enough time, their shadow creates dungeons within the TV world, representing their primary conflicts. In terms of actual gameplay, the player needs to search for the shadow's weaknesses in order to effectively combat them. Attacks typically include physical, electric, wind, fire, ice, light, and almighty. Most shadows will be immune or resistant to a number of these, so only certain attacks will work, and much of the challenge of the fights will amount to finding the weaknesses as quickly as possible. Each character has a main element in which they specialize. The protagonist can use all attack types, as long as they have the correct persona. There are also a number of status effects which can make combat extremely difficult if not dealt with properly. Battles occur with groups of shadows, so the player has to coordinate a series of attacks which target the various weaknesses. When a shadow is hit with its weakness, it is knocked down. If all shadows are knocked down at the same time, the players have the option to pile on, delivering a lot of damage to all the shadows all at once. Most abilities require SP to use. The player has as much time as they want in the TV world, however, they do need to monitor their use of SP, because if they run out, they will be unable to keep fighting, and they might have to leave the TV world and come back another day, wasting precious time for doing activities in the overworld. Recovering SP while in the TV world is expensive, requiring either the use of items which do not appear often, or the fox, who charges a lot of money. There are also some abilities and rewards which allow the player to recover SP at the end of battles. Recovering SP is much easier later in the game than in the first few levels though. At the end of the battles, the player will have a chance to earn a reward. Rewards come in the form of cards. Rewards include recovering health and SP, leveling up personas, gaining extra experience, more money, and collecting new personas. The dungeons take a long time. Each dungeon has 10 floors, and typically the player will be required to level up around 10 times. This takes 4 to 6 hours every single time. The floors are repetitive, though each dungeon has a different theme. The battles are engaging though, so while it's repetitive, it's not overly boring. Just get ready to take your time with each of the dungeons. If you go to the final boss underleveled, it will be extremely difficult and perhaps impossible. I tried. This game requires a lot of patience. There are special hands which the player can hunt in order to speed up the leveling process. Defeating a special hand gives the player much more experience and money than a typical battle will. However, these hands are very hard to kill and run away quickly. If you do get good at killing them, they are the quickest way to level up. The player can also return to previous dungeons in order to search for weaker hands and also search for different resources. About half of the game occurs in the TV world. The music in the TV world is super catchy and high energy, so at least you can jam out with it while slogging through the required grind. The story begins with the player coming to town to stay with his uncle Dojima and his niece Nanako. Soon after coming to town, a popular TV reporter is murdered under mysterious circumstances. The player makes friends with Yosuke, whose family runs the department store in town, Junes. He's new to town as well. And also Chie, who's local. Visiting the electronics store in Junes, the player discovers that they can enter the TV world and goes in with Yosuke and Chie. The trio discovers a room that appears to display the murderer's plot to kill the reporter. As they leave, they meet a friendly denizen of the TV spirit world, Teddy, who is a giant hollow teddy bear mascot costume. The Midnight Channel is an urban legend which states that if someone watches it at midnight when it's raining, they will see someone in the TV's reflection. That night they watch the Midnight Channel and see someone who looks like Saki, who's Yosuke's crush. Later, Saki is found murdered. She is the one who discovered the body of the reporter in the first place. Suspicious. Yosuke and the protagonist investigate in the TV world, where Yosuke meets his shadow self, a demon who despises that he was forced to move to the countryside. After defeating the shadow, Yosuke unlocks the ability to control a persona as well, Jiraiya. Their current theory of the murders is that the murder victims themselves are being thrown into the TV world. The next victim appears to be Yukiko, Chie's best friend from childhood. Worried, the three venture into the TV world, and Chie unlocks a persona of her own, Tomoe, after fighting her own shadow. A resentful Chie that hates that she's always had to take care of her best friend, Yukiko. They venture into the TV world and unlock the first full dungeon, Yukiko's dating show. Yukiko is frustrated with her feelings of societal pressure to find a boyfriend. The trio manages to save Yukiko, who also unlocks a persona, Konohana. And they save Yukiko. After Yukiko, the next victim is Kanji, a punk who's had trouble with the law. Kanji's dungeon is a bathhouse, and his shadow grapples with Kanji's insecurities about being perceived as a homosexual because he likes knitting. Kanji's persona is Take Mizakuchi. Following acquiring Kanji and saving Kanji, the school goes on a camping trip. And later, a teen pop star comes into town, Rise, who is putting her career aside for some time. The gang suspects that she's going to be the next victim thrown into the TV world, and that turns out to be right. Risei's dungeon is a strip club, and Risei's shadow grows from conflicts of being wholesome and being the object of desire for her fans. In this dungeon, the group also fights Teddy's shadow. Risei's persona is Himiko, and unlike the other characters, Risei is not an active participant in battles, instead offering the team aid from the sidelines in every single battle. Teddy's persona is Kintoki Doji. Following the striptease, Teddy manages to leave the TV world and joins a group in the overworld, manifesting a physical human body for himself. The group goes on a summer vacation to the beach, and they attend a fireworks festival. A suspect is apprehended for the murder, Yubo, who was caught killing the homeroom teacher, Morooka. The gang confronts Yubo in the TV world in a dungeon which takes on the appearance of a classic video game. After the confrontation, Yubo admits to the murders. However, some loose ends in the case lead the gang to believe that the case is not actually over, despite what the police and Yubo say. Naoto is a high school police detective who was brought into Inaba to help solve the murders. Naoto also suspects the case is not yet solved. The class goes on a cultural exchange trip to a private school, and then Naoto is kidnapped and thrown into the TV world. Naoto's dungeon is a secret lab, and her shadow grapples with her perception of needing to be seen as a man in order to succeed in the world of detectives. Naoto's persona is Sakuna Hikona. The classmates make a group date cafe for the school's cultural festival, and all of the characters are enrolled in a beauty contest. Junes Yosuke's mall is struggling, so Risei agrees to come out of retirement to perform a show to help the business. And so the gang works together to form a band and play for all the people of Inaba. The gang also at this time stays the night at Yukiko's family's inn and bathhouse. The gang celebrates the winter festival at the shrine as well. Following these events, though, a dense fog envelops the land of Inaba, and it starts to drive people mad. People are worrying that it's the end of the world. The fog is the same fog which shrouds most of the TV world. Nanako is kidnapped and brought into the TV world by Namatame, who the gang now thinks is the true culprit. Namatame is able to enter the TV world on his own, similar to the protagonist. He was also the boyfriend of the reporter from the beginning. Nanako's dungeon is heaven, and rather than fight a shadow, the gang fights Namatame. Due to the incident with Namatame, Nanako dies, and then she comes back to life. The gang realizes that Namatame was not acting of his own volition and was not responsible for the murders. Actually, Namatame never actually murdered anyone because he was constantly thwarted by the group. The true killer turns out to be Dojima's partner, Adachi. Adachi is also able to enter the TV world on his own. Adachi's dungeon is Magatsu Inaba, a dark and twisted version of Inaba. The characters fight Adachi, who wields a persona similar to the characters. Then they have to fight Ameno Sagiri, a guardian spirit of the TV world, who believes that mankind actually wishes to be shrouded in fog and turned into shadows. After being defeated, Ameno Sagiri agrees to remove the fog, but only for the time being. It is revealed that Teddy was actually a shadow the entire time. Marie goes missing. It's her own choice to leave, though. The group goes on a ski trip. During the ski trip, the group finds out that Marie has locked herself away in a dungeon in order to stop the fog from emerging from within her. Marie's dungeon is the Hollow Forest, and she has locked herself away because she, similar to Amina Sagiri, is a spirit of the TV world, and as long as she lives, there will be a threat that the fog will return. Marie's memories had been lost because she was originally a guardian spirit. However, her personality was split in two, and she forgot who she was. The group defeats the fog within Marie without killing her. On Valentine's Day, the player gets to spend the day with his favorite girlfriend. If there are others, they are sad that they are not the one. As the year wraps up, the player knows that they must pack up their things and return to the city. They say their goodbyes to all their friends. However, at the last minute, the group realizes that there is still one loose end. Turns out that the gas station attendant the player met in the beginning of the game gave the player their power to enter the TV world. They also gave it to Namatame and Adachi. The gas station attendant is a powerful spirit determined to haunt Inaba, named Izanami. Izanami's dungeon is Yamotsu Hirosaka, and Izanami is the other half of Marie who overpowered and split her in two. After defeating Izanami, the fog is destroyed for real. The protagonist has a tearful goodbye with his friends and leaves the city for good. They agree to catch up over the summer. When he comes back, everyone has changed a little. Chie's hair is flappy now. Rizette became a pop star again. Kanji became a nerd. Yukiko became a middle-aged woman, and Marie can now control the weather. Everyone is happy to see him, and they have a little party, remembering the good old days from the year before. The Magician Arcana represents the player's relationship with Yosuke. Over the course of their friendship, we learn about Yosuke's relationship with his family, who runs Juness, and the other employees. Yosuke is glad to have made a friend who also moved to Inaba recently. Some notable magician personas are Pixie, Jack Frost, Jin, and Mata. The Priestess Arcana represents Yukiko. Yukiko's family runs an inn in Inaba, and Yukiko, despite being considered a bombshell by her classmates, is actually very shy and reserved. Yukiko dreams of leaving the small town behind and making a name for herself, but eventually she decides that she has everything she needs in town. Notable priestess personas include Ganga, Parvati, and Skathach. The Empress represents Margaret, accomplice to Igor in the Velvet Room. Margaret challenges the player to fuse special personas. Notable Empress personas include Titania, Gorgon, Gabriel, and Isis. The Emperor represents Kanji. Kanji is a misanthrope and is raised by a single mother who runs a textile shop in town. Kanji gets in frequent fights with authority figures despite not actually committing crimes because of his bad reputation. Kanji eventually discovers his passion for making children's toys out of fabric and becomes very popular amongst the kids and mothers. Notable Emperor personas include Oberon, Thoth, and Odin. The Hierophant represents Dojima, the protagonist's uncle who takes him in. Dojima is still struggling to cope with the death of his wife in a hit-and-run accident. The culprit was never found, and Dojima still investigates her death. Eventually, Dojima learns to appreciate Nanako more, though he never truly gets over his wife's death. Notable Hierophant personas include Unicorn, Cerberus, and Koryu. The Lovers represents Rise. Rise has put aside her teen pop star career in order to be an ordinary high school girl working with her family's tofu shop in town. She is still chased down by her old agent and confronted with the fact that a new pop star has quickly risen to take her place. Rise eventually decides that she will return to her pop star career, but she's going to have to work her way back up again. Notable Lovers personas include Queen Mab, Leonan Sita, Raphael, and Ishtar. The Chariot represents Chie. Despite knowing Chie from the very beginning of the game, we actually learn very little about her and her family, except that she likes kung fu movies, and she's best friends with Yukiko. Chie confronts bullies, and over the progress of her social link, she helps out an old guy friend of hers from her youth. The guy harbors a crush for her friend Yukiko and is harassed by hooligans in the street. Notable Chariot personas include Ares, Thor, and Futsunushi. The Justice Arcana represents Nanako. Nanako lives at the house with the protagonist and Dojima and bonds with the protagonist as an older brother. Nanako struggles with her father's lack of work-life balance and spends most of her time all alone. Notable Justice personas include Angel, Uriel, and Shrousha. The Hermit represents a wily fox who resides beside the shrine. The fox takes wishes from shrine goers and tries to fulfill them with the help of the protagonist. The fox also offers services in the TV world. Notable hermit personas include Lamia, Mothman, Kurama Tengu, and Ongyoki. Wheel of Fortune represents Naoto. The relationship with Naoto follows a series of mysterious messages from a stalker, which the two investigate. Turns out the letters were from her grandfather, who just wants her to be happy. Notable fortune personas include Fortuna, Clotho, and Norn. The Strength Arcana represents the protagonist's relationship with two teammates, Ko and Daisuke. If you picked basketball team, you get to know Ko. Ko is an adopted orphan who was brought into a very traditional Japanese family. The family now has a blood heir though, and Ko feels as though his place within the family has been usurped. Ko learns to relax a bit more and take more solace in his friendships. If you pick the soccer team, you'll get to know Daisuke, who has not been living up to his full potential. Notable strength personas include Valkyrie, Titan, Hanuman, and Zhao Gongan. The Hanged Man represents Naoki. The player meets Naoki working with the Student Health Association. Naoki has a stigma in the school because his sister was the one murdered in the beginning of the game. Naoki learns to deal with his grief and help out his family more, who run the liquor store in town. Notable Hanged Man personas include Barith, Orthrus, and Attis. The Death Arcana represents Hisano. Hisano is an elderly lady the player can meet hanging out by the riverside. Hisano feels guilty for the passing of her husband and blames herself for his death. Before his death, her husband had lost all memory of her, yet she still had to care for him. She resented him for forgetting her. She wished that he would die, and so she blamed herself when he actually did. Hisano learns to forgive her husband and herself, and she also learns that she still has the rest of her family to live for and love with. Notable death personas include Mott, White Rider, Alice, and Mahakala. Eri is represented by the Temperance Arcana. Eri is a stepmother of Yuta, one of the kids at the daycare. She does not have a good relationship with her stepchild. She recently married her husband, who immediately had to go abroad for work, leaving her all alone to care for the child. Over the course of this S-Link, Eri learns to get along better with Yuta. Notable temperance personas include Sylph and Vishnu. The Devil Arcana represents Sayoko, who works at the hospital. Sayoko is initially mean to the protagonist, toying with their emotions. Sayoko is bitter because she got into an affair with a married doctor at the last hospital where she worked, and now there are rumors circling around her. Sayoko eventually decides to move on with her life and transfers to another hospital, but is optimistic about her future. Notable devil personas include Succubus, Lilith, and Beelzebub. The Tower Arcana represents Shu, who the player meets after accepting the tutoring job. Shu is a top-notch student, however, he struggles because he has too much pressure on him in school. Shu is also a target for bullying in school. A new student comes into town, and he's better than Shu. Eventually, Shu resorts to cheating. Shu learns to relax a bit in this S-Link, and learns to make friends as well. Notable tower personas include Ku Chulain, Mara, and Shiva. The Star Arcana represents Teddy. Teddy is a shadow who formed a bond with the group and managed to manifest himself into the physical world. Teddy is constantly amazed by the world and defies all logic. The Star S-Link automatically increases, so you don't need to hang out with Teddy. Notable star personas include Nico Shogun, Ganesh, Saturn, and Hillel. The Moon Arcana represents Ai. Ai is a delinquent student and from a rich family. The player initially meets Ai by skipping class with her. Ai has a crush on Ko or Daisuke, depending on which team you picked, though her feelings are not reciprocated. Ai has to deal with rumors being spread around her in school as well, and she's addicted to shopping. If you want to get with Ai, you have to turn her down initially, or she'll treat you as a rebound and bake up with you at the end of the game. Notable moon personas include Seth and Sandalphon. The Sun Arcana represents Yumi or Ayane. Yumi is in the drama class, and her estranged father, who she resents, has returned to her family and is in the hospital. Her mother decides to stand by her father's side, and Yumi hates this. Yumi eventually learns to forgive her father before he dies and decides that she wants to live life to the fullest. If you pick the band, on the other hand, you'll get to meet Ayane, who is struggling with her self-confidence in playing music. Notable sun personas include Yatagarasu, Horus, and Asura. The Eon Arcana, or the World, represents Marie. Marie has lost her memories and resides in the Velvet Room with Margaret and Igor. Marie asks the player to take her around the world so she can try to reclaim her old memories and make new ones. Notable Eon personas include Narcissus, Quetzalcoatl, Lakshmi, and Kaguya. The Joker persona is represented by Adachi. Adachi is the younger police officer transferred to Inaba to work with Dojima. Adachi serves as a family friend of Dojima until he turns towards the end of the game, when the Joker card turns into the Hunger card and Adachi turns evil. Notable Joker personas include Pale Rider, Baphomet, and Magatsu Izanagi. The Fool Arcana and the Judgment Arcana represent the entire friend group and is automatically updated. Notable Fool personas include Obarian and Loki. Notable Judgment personas include Anubis, Satan, Metatron, and Lucifer.